There are two kinds of people in this world. There are people who like the relentless futility, heat, pressure, the madness, the insanity of restaurant kitchens. And then there's everybody else, normal people.
Welcome to Friends of Anthony Bourdain, a podcast where we talk to friends, travel companions, and colleagues of Anthony Bourdain to learn what it was like behind the scenes working with Anthony Bourdain.
I'm one of your co-hosts, Fabrizio Villalpando. I'm a recipe developer and I make cooking videos online, and I am an ex-clumsy waiter who's worked in the restaurant industry for about over a decade now.
And I'm your other co-host, Emily Fedner. I am a cook, host, and I run a pasta pop-up in New York City. Today, we had the distinct pleasure of speaking to Sara Moulton, who is a culinary TV icon of decades. She's done thousands of live cooking shows and knew Anthony Bourdain in the 90s after the book, after Kitchen Confidential. Met Anthony Bourdain.
But a fun little fact is, I guess they went to the same culinary school, graduated, I believe she graduated 1 year before him, but they'd never crossed paths.
Ships in the night.
But I guess both of their legendary work would make them cross paths down the line. And yeah, she actually has this beautiful little picture of where she gets featured with Eric Ripert and Anthony Bourdain that she shows us today.
Sarah's in the background behind tall chefs, Anthony Bourdain and Eric Ripert, and she is basically stuck behind them in a freezer. Anyways, it's iconic. There's a whole backstory to it, but you have to listen to the episode.
And today we talk in depth about, I would argue, one of our favorite things to talk about when me and Emily are just stumbling around New York City bars. We love talking about the nightmarish stories that we've collected throughout the years of working in restaurants. And there's actually a book that Sara shares with us called Don't Try This at Home.
I'm taking that home.
Yeah.
Yes, we shared our kitchen nightmare stories and reminisced about the industry as a whole and how things have sort of the similarities between the current role that Fabrizio and I really occupy and the celebrity chef world and online and TV chef world.
Mm-hmm. And also we speak about a few other legends, Julie Child and Jacques Pepin.
Both of which had a strong impact on Sara's career and who she was really good friends with. So we definitely took liberties with how many questions we were
Yeah, we just had asking. A lovely long little chat, and I felt like we're about to just crack open a bottle of wine and keep
I was about to say, can we bring a bottle of wine next time? Can we bring one to the studio?
Absolutely. I'll make sure of that.
Yes. Add that to your rider. We don't have one.
Yeah.
So without further ado, here's our conversation with the wonderful Sara Moulton. We are very excited to speak with you today. And it's also so nice to have an in-person interview.
So say this is our first in-person interview.
Yeah.
So,
really?
It is.
Okay. No, I get that.
And the energy is just amazing and completely different.
I agree.
Yes. So nice.
Okay, Sara. Well, I guess we'll start out with the reason we're here today, which is, do you recall the first time you met Anthony Bourdain and what that was like? First impressions?
Now that's so crazy because no, I don't. Let me tell you the first time I was aware of him. I know it was 1999. He'd written the article in the New Yorker that was an excerpt from Kitchen Confidential.
Okay.
And in that year, I had 2 live shows on the Food Network, one from 7 to 8 and one from 10 to 11. And the one from 10 to 11 was called Kitchen Live Primetime. It was supposed to be a variety show where you're supposed to be drinking, having fun. And my producer was aware of Anthony, invited him on. However, I wasn't there. It's one of those nights. So it was a live show, meaning live. And occasionally the Food Network had needed me to do something else, so I wasn't there. So I don't even know who interviewed him. The boys had to fill in for me. I loved this. So it could have been Mario, it could have been Bobby, I don't know, or it could have been David Rosengarten was hosting it. And I heard he was great, but I didn't meet him. So I don't really know when I first met him. Our paths crossed because he became, famous overnight. And because I worked at Gourmet magazine, I was chef of the executive dining room. Mm-hmm. We did a lot of events with chefs, and Anthony was often there. That was one, so both the Food Network and also Gourmet magazine, our paths just kept crossing. One story I wanted to tell, And again, I
please
don't
do.
remember when I first met him. I mean, my God, he was tall.
Yeah.
Also, you and I are the same. We're both like 5 feet tall.
Yes, right.
And he was what, 6'4"?
I don't.
He was like a huge.
6'4",
He
I
was a
read.
string bean. He was just big.
Gangly and tall.
Yeah, my husband's 6'2", but Anthony, much more. But anyway.
Especially like at that time, he was just like very thin and overworked.
Oh, yeah, I know. So I have a friend named Boris Kinberg, who was the drummer for Mink DeVille. So rock and roll, this all makes sort of sense, right? And I called him up in advance of this podcast to confirm this, and he actually debunked it, but I don't care. I'm going to tell it the way I remember it, okay? So it's, again, right around when Kitchen Confidential came out, which I think is around 1999, 2000.
I think so.
2000. He was actually the dad of my daughter's best friend. And so he was over, and my husband, who's in the music business too, they liked each other a lot. I was talking about this book. Maybe Anthony had just been on, even though I didn't get to interview him or do anything with him. And I said, you got to read this book. You really do. And so he did. And then he decided he had a year off. Mink DeVille had to take some time off. He was going to go to cooking school and become a chef based on that book. And I was like, Boris, that is so counterintuitive. You know, you read that book, you're like, this sounds like hell.
It's terrible. Yeah.
I can't
Or
believe
the
it had
book
that
is great,
effect on a lot of people, though.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
It was au contraire, you know. It led people right into that hellhole.
They're like, there's a lot of sexual harassment, and it's really hot. People do drugs, and there's a lot of cussing, and some people are criminals. Bring it on.
Well,
Yeah.
it's like how he describes it. It's like just a bunch of pirates just doing the craziest shit.
I know.
Wanted a sense of community in a way.
Well, it was also very rock and roll.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things about Anthony's, he was a manly man, or he liked the tough guy image, smoking, drinking, partying, being tough,
Yeah.
sticking it out. And hey, you know, and Boris is a sweetie pie, but you know, that's his world too. So maybe it makes sense. How he debunked it is he said, oh no, I went to cooking school anyway, and then I read the book. And I said, Boris, that's not how I remember it. He said, well, maybe I read it twice, and I don't know. But at any rate, there's that. And then I mentioned to you this book had come out, Don't Try This at Home, which was a book about chefs making mistakes. What's the worst mistake, or what's a terrible thing that you did that you
I'm
should
so excited to
never
read
have
this
done?
now.
There's great stories in
So it's
there.
just like a collection of short stories from
all sorts of chefs.
that's
I think
amazing.
there's like 20 chefs in there, and they're names that everybody knew at the time. I mean, it was my generation of all the chefs. At any rate, so the people who were, you know, publicizing this asked 3 of the people who were in there. I'm sure there was other chefs they worked with. So it was me and Eric Repair and Anthony, if we would do like a promo for them for the book for New York Magazine. I was like, sure, I get to be with these 2 guys. I probably knew Eric better than Anthony. Loved Eric. He's a real sweetie pie. At any rate, so I went over to Le Bernardin, and there the 2 of them are. As a matter of fact, I kept saying to Eric, what are you doing hanging out with this guy? He's a bad influence. You know, that's back when I was bossy. I mean, I'm still bossy, but back then they listened to me. You know, I mean, I don't know if Anthony ever listened to me, but whatever. I had a show on the Food Network, so
No, you're kind of a badass.
so I was important back then. So
and
I
now,
just-
and now.
and I just said to them whatever I felt like it. You know, I just said whatever I wanted. I mean, for example, I used to tease Bobby Flay about why did he keep getting married. That's a really bad idea, Bobby. Just
Did
have
you not learn the
girlfriends.
first
Just
time, the
college
second time?
friends.
Just have
Third time?
girlfriends. Yeah, come on, you know. But anyway, so
I think it's just good advice. It's not even really teasing. So that's just good advice.
Yeah,
feel
I
like.
thought so. But whatever. I mean, he didn't seem to be mad. But at any rate, so I go to the restaurant, and we were trying to figure out what to do to sort of bring together the whole idea of this book. And so I think might have been Anthony's idea. He said, let's just lock Sarah in the freezer and make it look like, you know, she's stuck in there. And that's exactly what they did.
Do you have that? Who has the page of the magazine?
Oh,
I did
sure.
not realize you were literally locked in a freezer when I looked at that photo earlier.
No, I was locked. I think my bags.
Now I have to ask you, what is the worst cooking mistake you've ever made? Like, what's your contribution to the book?
Well, my contribution is actually a personal one. When you first go to cooking, so I went to the CIA also, the Culinary Institute of America.
And you actually graduated a year before Anthony?
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yes,
But
I
you
did.
didn't no one knew about him. Okay.
No, I didn't meet him. It's funny because how you miss people. You know, it just depended on actually who was in your tiny class. We had 452 people in my class. It was a 2-year program. So he and I probably overlapped by a year, but I never met him. But at any rate, anybody who goes to cooking school thinks they're a chef when they graduate, even though they tell you every day, you're not a chef, you're not a chef, you're not a chef. So you walk around like you know everything. My husband, who was a really, really good cook at the time, he wasn't my husband when I went to cooking school, but I used to go over to his house. I went to University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and I'd go over to his house. He'd be making brisket, really delicious brisket, or whipping up an omelet, or roasting a chicken, or doing something. I mean, he was very good. And
Serious
then
cooking.
but then I went to cooking school and I told him he was doing everything wrong. And so he stopped cooking. He forgot everything.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And now I would be so happy if he'd cook for me. If he'd just make me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, would you please?
Nice.
He does all the dishes.
Yeah.
But
That's nice too.
But at any rate, so it's Thanksgiving, year one, maybe, I think. I go home. I go to my sister's, and my sister and I sort of had a competition. She's 2.5 years older than me. Just growing up as two women, and
I have a twin sister. I fully get it.
Yeah. I'm being Miss Bossy Pants as usual, and it's time to make the mashed potatoes. And so I boil everything I learned at school. You use the russes. You boil them whole. So you make sure that you don't get them watery. The water is salted. You cook them just till they're done. You drain them. You listen to my CIA training. You dry them in the pan, and then meanwhile you're heating the milk or cream or whatever and softening the butter. And then you go and either use a potato masher, well, usually not a masher, but a ricer or a food mill, right? My sister didn't have any of those things. Nothing. I should have reached for a fork. What did I do? I put it in the food processor.
I knew you made the gummiest mashed potatoes ever.
If you have, Federico, you're a new cook, right?
Oh, yeah. Like a year, 2 years?
Right. So you wouldn't know this, but if you've been doing it for a while, if you do that, potatoes have such starch, and if you disturb their starch that much,
that's the gloop, right?
it is like wallpaper glue.
Yeah.
There is no way it will ever relax. And so my sister is just delighted.
She's like, I thought you were a chef, Sarah.
Yeah.
Didn't you learn something in school?
Yeah.
Oh.
So I threw more and more butter and more cream in there. And
Didn't save it, though.
that was the end of it. So that's my story. And Anthony's is about this horrible meltdown night. It wasn't really about him. It was more just a whole you're almost like this by the time you're done. It's a New Year's Eve, and the chef didn't arrive and didn't bring the menu, and all this stuff keeps arriving. They're trying to figure out what the heck to do with it. And, it's the kind of thing that keeps you awake at night.
Just the ticket machine screaming. To
I have anxiety just thinking about this.
That's exactly it.
I've had that experience from the perspective of a waiter. I think it was like Christmas Eve. The bartender didn't show up. A waiter didn't show up. They're like, it's going to be, it's going to be slow. Sushi restaurant, it was just mania. It was a nightmare. I still wake up at night screaming because of it.
We still relive that stuff.
Just jumping in on Expo and just everyone.
I feel like I want to read this book, but I feel like it is going to exacerbate a lot of my anxiety
but,
and PTSD.
No, I think it will. Eric's is it's very early on in his career, and he's in France. And when you go to one of those schools, this where they train you, you have to pick a lane. Are you going to be front of the house or back of the house? Because they take front of the house every bit as seriously as back of the house. And he was still on the fence, and some very important person came in with his wife, like a colonel, some decorated guy in a fancy suit. And Eric tried to bring them drinks and ended up spilling drinks on them 3 times, all over they're beautiful. The colonel and his wife. Anyway, it was fun revisiting this.
Wait,
so.
I wish we could tell these stories forever because there's so many.
It's like all coming back, just the shock.
I had that. It was we had an event. I was a server for many years of my life, on and off, and in between different jobs as well. And there was one night I worked at a fancy restaurant here in downtown Manhattan, and I believe we were doing a private, this really fancy art gallery had bought out the entire restaurant, and they would always kind of place me in the front with a tray of champagne flutes to welcome people as they came in. And I remember at one point I had to go down the stairs. By the way, this restaurant was 3 floors. I've never been in better shape.
You don't want to tell us the restaurant, huh?
Oh, it was Chinese Tuxedo downtown.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Yeah, I was a server there for a while. Great spot. Loved it. Celebrities and stuff would come there, and it was just so amazing. And I just remember there were two champagne flute accidents I had. One was on the bottom floor, and I was holding it, and I just watched one glass, slowly tip. It was like in slow-mo. I will remember this forever. And
You
the music had
overcorrected,
stopped or
didn't you?
something, and the one glass hit the other glass, and next thing I know, the entire tray of champagne flutes crashed,
Like
burned.
bowling.
Yep.
I was
gotta
like,
strike
I
on
am
champagne
actually
flutes.
powerless to stop this. Like, literally, what the hell do I do right now? I just have to. But that was at least on me and like on the floor. There was another time there was this really like rich Russian family, and I was waiting on them, and I was again with the champagne flutes, and they fell into the dad's lap, all of them.
Oh,
was
fun.
fun.
Oh, and then you can't exactly go with the napkin.
For everyone who's listening, when you go out to brunch and it's like a 12 top, 10 top,
Brunch
whatever
is
it
hell for
and
everyone
you
in the
order
industry.
12 glasses of mimosas, just know that there's a waiter crying in the walk-in. Because I remember, like, when I was like, the champagne flutes, they're
flutes.
terrible.
I'm done with them as a concept.
Even like those classic, like, triangular martini glasses. You just take one step and like half of the vodka. just
Champagne
slips
flutes
out.
and trays don't mix. They need to be
That's terrible.
like on a table
They need
anchored.
that thing you get all to put all your coffee cups in, anchored.
Yes. You know
That
what?
would be that.
I have an invention.
Yeah,
weighted champagne glasses with a weight at the bottom.
there.
Let's
I
do
like
that.
There you go.
Let's do
I
that.
like that.
And
All
then
right.
eventually, once the people get too drunk, they can't even lift it up the table.
It's perfect. It's multi-purpose.
Anthony Bourdain tragically passed away on June 8th, 2018. His death brought attention to the issue of mental health and highlighted the fact that mental health struggles can affect anyone, regardless of their public image or achievements.
Following Bourdain's passing, there's been an increased awareness and discussion surrounding mental health in the culinary and entertainment industries. Many celebrities and professionals have opened up about their own struggles, aiming to reduce the stigma associated with mental health issues.
It's so important to continue conversations about mental health awareness and provide support for those facing challenges.
That's why this episode is sponsored by Betterhelp. Betterhelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, and this is so important because finding a therapist can be super hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area.
BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days.
It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. It's betterhelp.com/FOAB. There's a link in the podcast description. Get started today and enjoy 10% off your first month. Discount code FOAB will be automatically applied. Actually, BetterHelp was my first foray into therapy because I really wasn't sure how to get started, and I had experienced a really big life event. It was the first platform I turned to demystify therapy, make it easy, and also it was very affordable. So very exciting to be able to partner with BetterHelp and spread the therapy gospel. It's something that I know you and I, Fab, really believe in and talk about often.
Especially with resources like BetterHelp that makes it more accessible. I mean,
We do speak so often about mental health struggles in the restaurant industry, making therapy affordable and accessible to line cooks and restaurant workers and people who might not have traditional health insurance is something that I feel so strongly about. So
highly recommend. Society will thank you. You will thank you. Your family and friends will thank you. Young men, please seek therapy. It's worked wonders for me.
it's betterhelp.com/FOAB. There's a link in the podcast description. Get started today and enjoy 10% off your first month. Discount code FOAB will be automatically applied.
One final Anthony connection.
Yeah, of course.
So I knew Lori Woolever,
Mm-hmm.
who's the person, who if you needed to get to Anthony, you'd reach out to
Mhm.
her. And so we had a good friend, Skiz Fernandez, was from Sri Lanka. So I reached out. I mean, this is it was fun to be able to make it happen. I reached
Mhm.
out to Lori, who reached out to Anthony, and he said, yes, let's do a segment with him. So they did. They went to Sri Lanka.
Oh my
So I was
God.
very happy about that. That was like score,
Like that right there, that was me. That's so funny. I was literally supposed to go to Sri Lanka in January, but it fell through.
Oh.
But it looks so beautiful. Now I want to rewatch the episode.
Mhm.
I have to ask you one last horror story question because I'm morbidly curious and fascinated. What is the worst thing that ever happened to you on live TV?
Well, so many, not just one. I dropped it. I burned it. We got 6 dirty phone calls in 6 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I was researching the show, I thought that was such an interesting concept. And it was just very like a friend calling another friend on the phone and like, what should I do with the roast chicken or blah, et cetera.
But it was real people.
Yeah.
We got the first one in the so this was a live show, not live to tape, not live audience,
Just
live.
streaming.
And these were real people who called. So we had a couple of people, literally phones, phones. I mean, I didn't pick up the phone. It came out over the loudspeaker, but the staff would, field the phone calls. And after the first week, we realized we had to limit the call because I'd be making hamburgers and they'd call in with a question about strawberries. It was a disconnect.
Yeah.
So we had to sort of steer them towards that. But we had no time delay. And the very first week we got one, I was making eggplant rollatini. And a guy called in and he said, tee-hee, how do you make eggplant a la penis? And I just said, I don't know, let's say his name was Ed.
Yeah, sounds like an Ed.
Ed, get a life. And I was surprised. I didn't think it was, but we had 5 more. It was about 1 a year. They got really good. So for 3 weeks, we didn't take any calls from any men.
Why are men always ruining it for the rest of us?
I
agree.
know,
I'm just
really.
kidding, but not.
Just certain men.
We're not the best.
Yeah, I mean, I was a sitting duck. When we finally got a time delay, which was after one half in the evening, we gave up because it was like the old days. You guys don't know, you're too young, of long distance phone calls to Europe where you'd say hello. Hello.
Oh my God.
I mean, can you imagine? No, the energy that you get with live TV just goes right out the window.
Yeah.
Completely.
So we stopped doing that. But there were 3 fires on the show. One of them, actually, again, I wasn't there, but I loved telling. So that doesn't help. But it was the second show, the 1999 second show, Cooking Live Primetime, and David Rosengarten was hosting. And he had Andrea Immer, who is a wonderful wine woman, expert, and a couple other people on. And David's up there cooking something. Everybody took turns cooking. And the towel under his cutting board caught fire. And the boys, I just loved it because they didn't know how to handle this live show. Because you had to answer questions. People could call up. If I was making something with peppercorns, say I just went bloop, bloop, bloop with the black pepper, with a pepper grinder, they could call in and say, what's the difference between white, black, pink, and green?
You just have to know.
I'd have to know.
You probably have the most culinary knowledge out of
After
anyone
doing
we've spoken to.
After doing that, I had to.
Yeah.
And just like to be able to think on your feet like that and to be able to be eloquent and kind of just handle things that is hard. I don't think anyone realizes how hard that is.
That was it was hard, but I did my homework, believe me. So let's say I'm making, chicken cacciatore, whatever. I'd research every part of it. So I was ready, But at any rate, so on this David Rosengarten show, so the boys all sweated it because they, of course, didn't know homework. They would just go on like, I know.
Like the little bad boys of TV.
Yeah.
It's just in my
Yeah,
veins.
we just flambe stuff on.
Yeah, exactly.
Just need a glass of bourbon.
Yeah. So at any rate, so this towel catches fire and David goes, oh no, we need to stop tape. And one of the camera guys is saying, no, David, it's live. So Andrea, very quietly, who's sitting around the corner of the counter, by the way, we had a real sink with real water, okay? But David didn't know it or forgot it or whatever. So she comes over, grabs the towel, puts it in the sink, and puts out the fire with a beautiful bottle of Bordeaux. It was very elegant. But anyway, so we had a couple other fires when I was there. But, I'd put the lid on the food processor and it'd get stuck. Wednesday nights, we had a cook-along. So that was truth in advertising. No prep was done. I had to do it all from scratch. And we'd have somebody cook along with me. We'd give them the grocery list. So they'd cook while I cooked. And hopefully we all got to the finish line. I noticed increasingly it would be me alone and then whoever was cooking with me, and we'd show them on Skype, right? They'd have like 8 people helping them. And so some nights I didn't even finish cooking the veal chop or whatever the heck it was. But of course they would have rounded it up and gotten it done. So it was hell every night. Also, I had guests who sometimes weren't nice. And although most people were nice because so many people were discovered on my show.
Who was the worst guest? And who was your favorite?
I'm not going to tell you who was the worst.
We'll do it privately.
Yes, we'll do it privately. Who was my favorite? I had Rick Moonen on a million times. You guys probably don't know him.
I don't know who that
He's
is.
now in Las Vegas. He was the chef at Oceana. And he was just like a big kid, like a 5-year-old. He was just a lot of fun.
So it must have been fun, like entertaining on to watch on TV and
Yeah, I
everything.
mean, you know, I have no shame. I would just ask all these questions. So I'd say he was my favorite.
Aw.
We're gonna have to
Yeah.
look him up.
But I had everybody. I mean, I did 1,200 of those shows,
Wow.
and then another 300 of a taped show. But and we had repeats.
1,200.
Yeah, and I'd say of those, probably 400 of them were with guests,
Uh-huh.
and the other 800 I did by myself. But it was
Which
so
that must be very intimidating, right? Just like carrying a whole segment, like or show.
well. No, the thing is, I wasn't
Uh-huh.
alone. I got like 5 phone calls a night.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of times it would be the caller. Well, first of all, I'd be helping them. They'd call in with a question. Wednesday nights was a different thing.
Mhm.
But the other nights I'd be making, you know, I don't know, chicken cacciatore, and they'd say, you know, what do the different sized chickens mean? I mean, the questions you'd get now are different than the questions you got then.
Mhm.
And it was much easier back then because it was the Wild West. People didn't know anything.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
they'd
yeah.
say, what are panko breadcrumbs? You know, that was an easy one. And there was a lot of questions
Mhm.
like that. Now it'd be, I do the same kind of thing with Chris Kimball on Mill Street Radio, and we get calls like, I was just given a whole steer. What is the best way to cook the testicles? I said pesticles. The testicles.
Give him a
With
pesto.
Yeah, right. At any rate, so back then they were, but I was never alone because I was always talking to these
Mhm.
people. And sometimes they would take me through it. So I remember one time talking to some lady in the Midwest, German background, about how to make sauerkraut. You know, from step 1, step 2. It also involved some sort of outhouse that
Mhm.
wouldn't explode with the aroma and the gas that is given off by sauerkraut.
My grandpa did it in his tiny apartment, and he made cow tongue in that apartment. I mean,
Yeah.
the Russian Jews are not shy to smells. But anyways,
Yes. Any rate, so I was never alone. And the staff, we had so much fun. It was like a party every night.
That's fun.
Um,
Like a little
what
dinner
a
party.
cool
Yeah.
career.
that was the best. That's my favorite, most favoritist job ever was the cooking live.
Mm. Well, I was kind of curious because, you know, at that time, like you said, what are panko breadcrumbs? Now I feel like because of like social media cooking and everything, I'm curious what your perspective is because it must be nice to see people be like, I don't know, like I was at a friend's house and he likes to cook occasionally and he had like an Escoffier cookbook, right? Or, you know, and nowadays, like everyone just knows so much about all this crazy stuff. So I'm curious, like, what is your perspective on those online cooks that just like want to share the recipes? And I feel like there are a lot of
He's asking if you're on
bad
board with the
ones.
TikTok chefs.
Yeah, I'm trying to tiptoe
Well,
around the
full
question.
disclosures, I said I'm going to have to
Yeah.
start watching it because of you.
Fabrizio's a good one.
Okay, you talk to any old school person like
Mhm.
me, and I'm not the oldest of the old school. I only worked in restaurants for 7 years. But, you know, they all hate these young people. We
yeah.
all hate them
Yeah.
because we walked 5 miles to school, damn it. And you just picked up a knife badly and pretended you knew what you were doing. I'm not referring to you.
There's a lot of it's almost like history repeats itself with the whole like macho flambeing and
Yeah.
now it's slapping steaks and being all performative and
Well, but let me
Yeah.
just say this
Yeah.
about that. One of the things I discovered when I did the live show, because I talked to home cooks,
Mhm.
is home cooks who are serious home cooks are really no different than professional chefs.
Mm.
Absolutely no different, because if they cook over and over and over again, and if they perfect their dishes, there's no better way to learn how to cook than to cook.
Yeah.
So having said that snobby thing about, you know, you guys did not do your time in kitchens, on the other hand, there's so much you can learn
Mm.
all by yourself.
I feel like I understand every viewpoint of
Oh, yeah.
the matter. Like I understand why people would be super annoyed by social media chefs, and I also understand how they're doing a lot of great things for culture. But I think that at every juncture of the development of the celebrity chef, there are people who have an ego. There are people who like recognition and fame over actually getting in there and doing the work. And I think that was true back when, you know, celebrity chefs and TV chefs became a thing, and it remains to be true nowadays, right? Because I
Yes.
see it, you see it on TikTok, on Instagram, because there are some people where I look at their account and I'm like, you're amazing. You clearly, you've taken this wealth of information in front of you. You've learned how to use a knife. You've learned so
proper
much stuff.
technique,
You look
yeah.
like a chef and your food looks amazing. And then there's some people that I'm like, why are people watching you and learning from you?
It's the old thing about entertainment versus education.
Yeah.
And entertainment almost always wins. So if you have a big personality and you look good on camera, you're telegenic, usually you're the one who gets ahead.
Mhm.
My biggest problem is with misinformation or doing something wrong. Also,
And saying it with conviction just because there's a camera in front of your face and you're like, this is how you do this. And then it's just so completely not the right way to do
it. And
or even like
sometimes-
dangerous too.
yes,
Which is,
even like dangerous. Like you never add alcohol to a pan when it's on the flame.
Mhm.
You must take it off and
Yeah.
do it, and then bring it on and
And
let
don't
it.
have like the over the
yeah,
the what's it called, the exhaust just going,
yeah.
or that's happened to me. That's
I
a bad
think
mistake.
humility goes a long way. It's okay to tell people you don't know something. It's okay
Yeah.
to admit that you don't know
lot of
everything.
people-
I learned that very early on because I still hesitate to call myself a chef. I didn't go to culinary school. I did line cook.
Well, line cook is more,
It's
more
organization
credible,
and-
more credible than
Mhm.
going to cooking school.
I spent so many nights crying, but so many. But and now I have a pop-up, but I don't mind telling people I don't know something because I think that's a larger marker of confidence than to just pretend you know everything.
Oh yeah.
And no one wins when you can't admit to being wrong or to not knowing anything, right?
Absolutely. And
Or to
I
not knowing
actually
something.
read that about Julia Child. We have to talk about Julia Child.
Yes.
That's what Jacques Pepin said. We interviewed him as well for the podcast. And he said he loved that Julia, in a room full of people, if everyone was discussing some culinary thing, she would say, I have no idea what that is. Can you tell me about that? And he just thought that was so cool that she was herself and didn't mind not knowing things.
No, she was ridiculously humble.
Yeah.
Let's just pause on Jacques Pepin for half a second because Kitchen Confidential
Uh-huh.
was really an important book. I mean, it beautifully written, and really did encapsulate the situation, even for me. I mean, I was in more mixed kitchens. I mean, there were women in my kitchens. Jacques Pepin's The Apprentice
Mhm.
is likewise one of the hands down best books that anybody who wants to become a chef should
I'm
read.
currently listening to that one. Currently.
I'm gonna start
Embarrassed that I
listening
haven't
to
listened to it before. And also I say listening because I listen to those books while cooking. I think the art of reading has been sort of lost on
There's
me.
nothing wrong with that. Are you enjoying it?
It is so good. I love the narrator on Audible. He has a French accent. It's not super strong, but he has a French accent, so it's transportive. Jacques Pepin, my favorite quality in humans in general is humility. I think he's one of the most humble people.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, he's
And
you
it comes
know,
across.
There will never be another Julia. There will never be another Jacques, and
Mm.
both of them are that.
Yeah.
Very very humble.
People that make you feel comfortable regardless of what they've accomplished, how much money they have, how much fame they have, those are the greatest, most grounded people. And I feel like they really share those qualities, at least from what I can tell from, I don't know Julia, but from what I've heard of her, and even just our short time
Mhm.
speaking with Jacques.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of my favorite quotes that I'm paraphrasing from Jacques. It's him and Tony during some interview, and Tony starts talking about like, Jacques, what is your favorite, or what is your biggest guilty pleasure meal? He's like, and then Tony goes on to say, I'll put on a hoodie, head down, and I'll go to Popeyes to get their, neon orange slop that is, the most delicious thing in the world. And
Mac
then,
and cheese.
and then he asks Jacques, he's like, what is your guilty pleasure meal? And he goes, well, Tony, there's a difference between you and I. I feel no shame or guilt. and then he just starts talking about like, I love Oreos, I love Fig Newtons, I love Jell-O, this, and that. And that, because I didn't really grow up eating grew up eating out of a box or jar or whatever it was. And I feel like in the culinary space, there can be that sort of pretentious air where everything has to be.
Can be.
You know,
Oh my God,
yeah,
there is so
it's-
much of
The
that.
snobbery.
Or
Yeah.
even like what's crazy too, even on the internet with these people that aren't chefs technically or whatever it is, like the snobbery with the home cook too. It's transcendent to the home.
You know what I always say? I think that people who need to rely on fancy best ingredients and or the most expensive versions of things, I'm not saying this is always true, but I think that sometimes that to me denotes a lack of personal taste.
Mhm.
Because if you can sit here and be like, the Popeyes mac and cheese is the greatest thing ever, I don't care if people think that's your personal taste. And I feel like that's probably very pervasive in the fashion world as well. But being able to develop your own personal taste means you're okay with putting a cube of ice in a glass of red wine because it doesn't matter and that's how you like it. And
Yeah.
that's way cooler than being obsessed with the right way or the best way.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. On that note, Julia Child loved McDonald's French fries and wished that they still cooked them in beef fat.
Julia Child played a really important role in your life and career. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm.
How much time do you have? I would never be where I ended up if it wasn't for her. I mean, I was just one of those classic right places, right times.
Mm-hmm.
I met her in Cambridge in 1978. It was because I was the chef manager of a catering operation, and somebody who worked for me was a volunteer on Julia's show. One day I hated catering. I don't like doing volume cooking. Ew.
Catering's so hard.
It's really hard. Anybody who does it really well, I have so much respect for them. But anyway, we were peeling a million hard-boiled eggs. And I started talking about how and we must have cooked it the way Julia does, which was not the way I do it now. Now I steam them. But back then, you put them in cold water. This is what she did. You bring it up to a boil, you take it off, you leave the lid on, and she gave it way too long, I think 15 minutes. But at any rate, and then you take it out and you put it in ice water. I mean, she did other things because Julia sometimes made things a little more complicated than they needed to be. Like, she'd stick it with a pin to provide a little air. I don't know. But at any rate, we started talking about it. And this young woman I was talking
Whole
to
situation.
said she was a volunteer on Julia's show. Public television show. And I said, do you think she'd like another volunteer? And she said, let me ask her. So she comes back the next day and she says, I talked to Julia and she wants to hire you. I said, pardon? She wants to pay me? Why? She said, I don't know. She said, I told her all about you and she was very impressed. Go call her. So I go down the corner payphone. This is 1978, because I didn't want to do it in the office at the
Kids these days don't have to use payphones. They don't know what that's like to walk to a payphone.
I know there's so many things.
Brats.
I mean, what's a record? For example, my husband, we have 3,000 records, and young people today just don't know about records.
They're like, that's a cool decoration for my Williamsburg loft.
Yeah,
I could
exactly.
put that on my coffee table.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. You two are very young too. But at any rate, so
We're kind of making fun of ourselves a little bit too, I'm sure.
It's all right. It's all right. We're all on the same team. So I went down and called her up, and she gets right on the phone. She was listed. So you could call her, particularly on Thanksgiving. People would call her, with those dreadful questions. My turkey's been in the heated garage for 3 days. Do you think it's still okay to cook?
Yes, if you would like to murder your entire family.
Right. Or no, order out for pizza. But at any rate, so she gets right on the phone and she says, hello, dearie, I've heard all about you. Do you food style? Now, this is 1978. Food styling was not the codified art that it is now.
Mm.
And so I had to do some really quick thinking. I was like, well, let me see. The last restaurant I worked at, they said that I did a really good job garnishing each plate. I just did cold poached decorated salmon for $700. That looked pretty good. Hey, I used to do watercolors in high school. Don't ask me what that has to do with anything. So I lied. I said, yes, I'm really good. So I got hired. The backstory is because I'd gone to the CIA, she thought I'd probably learned food styling. And this was a 3-month gig, which is so odd on public television, because now I have a public television show. That's not how you do it. But back then, they worked 3 days a week for 3 months. I have no idea why. And they developed the recipes as they went along, which is
That's
something.
crazy.
Julie and Jock did it when they did their show, too. I was like, yeah. Why?
Jeez.
I know.
I'm at the room for error.
Rosie Manel came and did all the food styling, but Rosie couldn't make it till midway. So Julia needed a backup. We weren't just doing the show, we were also doing a cookbook to go with it. And unbeknownst to me, we were developing the recipes as we went along.
So did you get credited in the cookbook?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah. They had pictures of all of us.
Yeah.
So here's the other funny thing. Unbeknownst to me, she hired somebody else to do the same job as well, because that's how nervous she was. Marion Morash, who happened to be married to Russell Morash, who was the director. So Marion and I, the first day, look at each other like, who are you? Who are you? We managed to bumble through. I had finally gotten the job I really wanted, concurrent with getting the job with Julia. So I was the chef of a restaurant, a little restaurant in Boston in Faneuil Hall. And so I started both of those jobs at the same time. So I worked 7 days a week for the 3 months. But I could only work Mondays and Wednesdays for Julia, so I missed Tuesdays. And remember, we were developing the recipes. So things would change by the time I came in on Wednesday. And I'd come in and I'd say to Marion, so I'd start prepping it the way we were doing it on Monday, because Marion never filled me in. Somebody on the staff noticed that perhaps there was a little friction. And maybe it'd be a good idea to give everybody a title. And so Julia gave us all titles. They were all executive titles. So Marion was the executive chef, and I was the executive associate chef. And after that, Marion didn't tell me the changes in the recipes again. And I was fine with that. It made complete sense for her to be the chef. In charge.
Yeah.
And Marion and I became good friends, and I ended up working on Victory Garden Cookbook and her show. And it was a good moment, but it was just typical Julia that she couldn't do that. It was really fun. Every day we sat down for lunch. We'd eat usually the stuff we were making. And we'd set up long tables. We had a woman named Tammy Hyde, whose job it was. By the way, the name of the show is called Julia Child and More Company. I think we shot, 12 episodes. I don't remember. Anyway, so Tammy was her job as a volunteer to set the tables. We would have tablecloths, cloth napkins, flatware, not plasticware. We'd start with a little aperitif. We'd have a little vermouth.
You're very good at
This
this.
is very good.
I don't know, but you know what? Like you said, you don't know sometimes if what you talk about Anthony, if he'd appreciate what you say. I'm not sure she'd like me imitating her, but she can't help it, And then we would have wine with lunch. So after lunch, things moved very slowly. So I understand that in subsequent years, there was no wine at lunch anymore. That was the end of it. But it was really fun because there would be like a rotating, people would come visit while we were cooking. And Julia ended up one day, this chef came to visit from France. He had a 1-star restaurant in Chartres, France. At any rate, before I knew it, she signed me up for an apprenticeship with him for 3 months in France, or 2 months in France.
Did you do that?
I did. And it was wild. Turns out the guy was, so what else is new with the French guys? A dirty old man. And he just saw me as a possibility to,
He's like, yes, I want an apprentice.
Yeah, come to France.
It would have been different. He was cute, but he was short, fat, bald, and ugly.
And were you married at the time?
Oh, no, I wasn't. I had a boyfriend who's now my husband, who I adored, but he was married, and I was working with him and his wife. She worked at the restaurant, and his daughter. And I was like, this is awkward.
So it didn't even stop him, though, from being
trying.
A tale as old as time. I do want to ask you, what is your favorite thing that Julia ever made that you tried?
I don't know if I could pick one thing, and she didn't make it. We made it. I have to tell you one story.
Yes,
this one's a shorter one.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. We would make 3 backups for every single thing she made at every single stage. French onion soup day, okay? Which involved 8 cups of sliced onions.
The amount of crying that went down.
Yeah. So times 3 for step 1, put them in the pan. For times 3 for step 2, they're golden. Then step 3, they're really golden. And then so on and so forth. So there was, and what we would do, Marion and I would set up tray after tray after tray behind her. So if we needed to do a retake, which I don't think we ever did, not once, she could just reach behind and bring it up. And so, so we're all set up for the French. And you're right, there's a lot of crying going on. And Julia starts with the baguette. Because you got to make the croutons, right? So she holds up 2, and one was a Wonder Bread version, or maybe I should just say a floppy bread version, because we got to be careful about saying mean things about brands. And she holds them up, and sure enough, the floppy one flops.
Yeah.
And she said, first, you're going to start with the right bread. And this one goes flop. And she said, and this one you can see has no integrity. It's disgusting. So she takes it and she throws it behind her back. And Marion and I are like, holy shit. Is she going to wipe out, all the prep we just did? And so the thing sailed over tray after tray after
With the whole baguette?
Yes, the whole thing. It's like a boomerang going over all our trays. It could have wiped them all out, but it just made it over the top and then wrapped itself around a bottle of wine, beautiful red wine. Again, seems to be a theme in the corner. And Marion and I both exhaled. But she was a wild woman. You never knew what she was going to do. And she made a point of making mistakes. So she was great. Because of her, I started working at Good Morning America with her. And then because of that, I got hired as their executive chef doing all the prep for all the chefs. So I did that from 86 to 96. And because of that, I think that's why the Food Network approached me to run their kitchen, which I said, no, I don't want to, because I had a good job at Gourmet with benefits. But then that's how I ended up doing On Air. Also, when I moved to New York, she helped me get a job at my dream restaurant.
Which restaurant was that?
Well, it wasn't my first choice, but I will say in the end, it was the best restaurant for me. It was a restaurant called La Tulipe. It's no longer. it was a woman chef, actually, Sally Dar. And she was extraordinary. I probably learned more from her than anybody else, including Jacques and Julia. She was really good, and she wasn't trained. But I interviewed with Andre Saltner, Alain Sayac, all the old French chefs. Well, they weren't old back then. They were oldish. But of course, they wouldn't hire me because I was a mere female, although I became friends with them in recent years. But back then, no, they wouldn't. They did it because Julia asked them to. But anyway, she opened so many doors.
It's just crazy how that snowballed from the one chance. And that's why that's such a lesson. You have to just ask for things that.
Well, I was gonna hammer on that word. Lie. Like when there's an opportunity that comes to you and you're like, I could figure this out as I go, and
that's
trust yourself.
I think that just get your foot in the door and then prove yourself.
But that's what Jacques or Jeremiah? I can't remember. But we were talking about the concept of hospitality. It was Jeremiah. The answer is yes, and then you figure it out. And he was talking. He told like a cute story about how he wanted an umbrella. He was at some beach bar in Thailand, and he asked if there was an umbrella. I guess it was really sunny, and they were like, yes. And then, like 30 minutes later, someone came with a palm tree or something, or
like a banana tree.
A banana tree, and they just figured it out, even though that's not. So, anyways, I would say that that's it's less of a lie and more of a challenge to yourself.
Right, and I think it's a good advice to give. I agree with both of you.
So you heard it here. Sarah's telling all kids to get out of school, do whatever you want,
and lie.
Lie to everyone, especially your parents.
Oh, yes.
Fake it till you make it, but you have to actually have some skills behind that. Favorite dish that you've ever made on one of your shows? We're talking about thousands of episodes, so it's okay if there's not just one.
Oh, geez. I'm drawing a blank because, when I did the Cooking Live thing, I did 3 to 4 recipes a night, multiply that.
Was there anything, especially because it's a live show, which is such an interesting thing, you take a bite and you don't like it. And you're like, make this at home, America. Like you're really hiding.
It's funny. One of the things I used to say, not because I didn't like it, but because I screwed it up somehow. Yeah. I'd look in the camera and say, you'll do better than I did.
That's so charming. Everyone wants to know that people.
Well, listen,
F up.
If Julia Child could screw up on national TV, I figured so could I. Yeah. And if I don't mind screwing up on national TV, why should you worry about what you do in the privacy of your own kitchen? Yeah. As Julia said once, the most famous thing, and we all thought she dropped a turkey on the floor and picked it up and looked in the camera and said, remember, you're alone in the kitchen. It wasn't a turkey. Apparently, I think she was making a crepe or an omelet, and some of it went on the burner. But she looked in the camera and said, remember, you're alone in the kitchen. And that is so true. Yeah. And there's almost one thing I can think of that you can't. Oh, no, 2. One of them is mashed potatoes. If you do them in the food processor, you can't fix it. That's wallpaper glue. But the other one is if you burned it. You can say you smoked it, but I don't think so.
I had a funny experience at my pasta pop-up years ago when we first started doing the raviolo alla uovo, which is a notoriously kind of difficult dish to nail.
Tell us about it, because it's got an egg inside.
Yes, so it's basically, we hand make it the day of the event. It's in the summer, the filling is sweet corn and chive, but it varies seasonally. And there is a gorgeous amber egg yolk in the center. It's covered, and then you have to boil it. And here's the thing: we serve 26 people, so you have to make sure the boiling time is enough so that while it continues steaming and cooking, as we plate it, as we sauce it, it doesn't overcook. And I'm like, this story about you saying like, yes, I've got this, and yes, I can food style. That is so me. Or in the early days of the pop-up, I told Sarah like, yes, we can do this. I can do this. Totally, it's fine. And we practiced it, but we only practiced making one.
Oh, dear, yes.
So cooking timing-wise, we were like, and it didn't even occur to me, and this a few years ago, when we went to serve our paying customers at the pop-up, they were eating fucking hard-boiled eggs. Oh. It was, okay,
hard-boiled. But that's rule number 2. Never apologize, never explain.
Okay, so that's what I told, okay, I love this. This is all working out. It was a jammy egg, so I was like, Sarah's in the corner, like freaking out, and I was like, Sarah, here's the thing. It doesn't taste bad. And we're going to, you know what? I'm making up a story. And I was like, just go with it. We walk out there. I'm so sorry if anyone who went to that dinner is listening right now. We walk out there, and I was like, so the ravioli alla uovo is the Goldilocks of the pasta world for me. And I know a lot of people like their eggs sunny side up, but to me, that's gross. I don't really need the runniest egg. You know what? But I also don't really like hard-boiled eggs. For me, The jammy egg yolk is this illustrious, hard to achieve texture. And so today we're doing our take on the raviolo allo ovo with a jammy yolk, a perfect texture to complement. And I just like made up a bunch of stuff, and everyone loved it. The end.
Excellent, brilliant. No, that is just absolutely. I mean, I have a magnet on my refrigerator with Julia in it that my niece made for me that says "Never apologize, never explain." Because people, you're talking about the restaurant industry, and you were brilliant right there. But
Thank you.
When you're at home and cooking, and people come over, and you're professional and you have your pride. I mean, to this day, even I have to control myself because I want to say, "Oh, I didn't add enough salt. That needed
that wasn't
some
as
acid."
good. Oh my God, me too. I'm so
Yeah,
glad.
and they're just so happy you cooked and they didn't. Yeah. Don't ruin their meal. It's the best thing you ever made,
And they're probably not even going to notice.
And so much of cooking and so much of the hospitality experience really is the experience of it. So people are not going to remember the exact, that dish was undersalted. They're going to be like, that was so much fun. Those girls we were having such a great time and laughing. There was all this wine. And that's going to be what people remember.
Right.
But it's definitely hard to not apologize for yourself or be hard on yourself. And I think that's something a lot of people in the culinary industry share.
Emily was there for, what was it, my 25th birthday?
It was amazing.
For like 15,
he made like every salsa and every single thing from scratch. It was crazy.
But it was the first time I'd ever cooked for like an abundance of people. And
Which
I remember,
is hard.
I mean, it was my birthday too, and everyone was like, "Oh, let's sing him happy birthday." I was like in the back of the kitchen, just like staring at everyone, like, is everyone eating? Is there food in their mouths?
Meanwhile, I definitely texted you the next day and said the food was incredible, and I had the best
Well, I
time.
appreciate that, everyone. I hope you heard that.
Everyone loved it. Yes, you heard it here
Nice.
first.
But I think that's a great thing that you've done in your careers. Sort of, bring confidence to like the home cook or anyone who's watching.
Well, I certainly learned from Julia. So, and back to where we started here, the best way to learn how to cook is to cook.
Yeah.
It's just do it and you'll learn. You just can't help it. Yeah.
It's hopefully usually delicious trial and error process.
And even if it's not, you learn something. And I feel like
do.
you just have this lovely you have this lovely way about you. And just watching some of your episodes and watching you cook, you make it okay to just learn and experiment. That's so important for people to remember, especially because I think that historically the culinary industry has seemed really intimidating to people.
Oh, I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's one good thing that I think has arisen from the TikTok
Yeah, I
and
agree.
Instagram chef.
I
If we
agree.
can do it, you can. There's so many different versions of the culinary industry. And I feel like one of the reasons Anthony Bourdain was so beloved was because he would revere the Vietnamese noodle stall and the street vendor as much as he would a gorgeous prefix at Le Bernardin. And it kind of allowed people to feel proud of their cooking and their food and their cultures, not feel embarrassed to try things. And that's interesting because we were just talking about how you get people to try cooking and learn how to cook all the time. So if you had to summarize Bourdain's greatest impact on you, what would that be?
It would be exactly that. I mean, watching his shows, that he would take you to the street food. I mean, I worked at Gourmet magazine for 25 years. Oh dear. Well, at any rate, it was a food and travel magazine. So we knew about a lot of the things that he was talking about, but most people didn't. And for the longest time, the French in particular had a grip on this country with French cuisine is the it cuisine. And we weren't, not that regionally there weren't all the other cuisines happening, but they weren't celebrated. And by him going around the world and talking about these foods and tasting these foods and describing them, I think he really made Americans more aware of all the other cuisines we should be eating. So that was, really, he brought it down to everyday people.
He made the, more niche and lesser known cuisines less intimidating in much the same way that people like Julia Child and you and Jacques Pepin have made cooking less intimidating, because his focus was, as much as he was a chef, a cook, his focus wasn't that. I think that,
And he was such a great storyteller. Yeah. Such a great story. I mean, I love reading his, just reading that little story about that nightmare on a New Year's Eve when everything headed south. He's just so funny and so interesting.
Yeah, you're even in his cookbook, Appetites, like the little written segments where you're like, you can't, like, there's just no other cookbook that has like these like little quippy things or these like intense little stories or anecdotes or silly little lines.
Very honest in the way he wrote. And that's another thing about Julia. Julia was, you're not going to, you may think so, you may not think so. She's one of the funniest people I ever met. I mean it. And it was really just because she'd call it for what it was. She'd see right through it and just say, but that's, emperor's new clothes sort of thing. I mean, she was never rude. She had great manners, but she was a riot. And I think he was similar in that he just saw it for what it is and said it for what it was, including about himself.
I love that. It's another favorite quality of humans.
There's no way to make money in our industry anymore. No way. It's really, really hard. And what you guys do is one of the ways you can. And that's fine, and I get it. But for me, the way I saw it is, why would anybody believe anything I say if I've been paid to say it?
Yeah.
If I've been paid to say something about this product, why would they believe it when I say something else? So for the longest time when I was on the Food Network, I would mention products by name, but because I like them.
And not 'cause you're getting
But
paid.
then the Food Network would say, no, you can't do that. They don't pay us for you to say that.
And I definitely understand the concept of not wanting someone else to exploit your name and make money. And it's interesting. Honestly, that's something that we maybe have to think about and grapple with. We are hosting a podcast that is centered around the premise of Anthony Bourdain, someone we've never met and are not friends with. And that's what's, I don't know if selling the podcast is the word, but it's interesting because there's a level of that is something to think about.
Well, no, I think there's nothing wrong with this. This to me is a whole different ballgame because you're celebrating a great person who did a great thing, who was really unique. There's nothing wrong with that. And having, fascinating conversations with people who knew him. Yeah. And you come up with all sorts of interesting things.
It really is such an honor and it's so fun. Well, we need to ask you one last question that we ask all our guests.
Oh dear, I'm scared.
Oh no. Well,
is this my last meal? No.
No, but that actually is one of my favorite questions, but I think it's overdone now, so I've stopped. Where were you when you found out about Anthony Bourdain's passing and, how did that impact you?
It was pretty devastating. Also because we all wondered why. I think we have a better idea now. I don't know. I won't even wade in there, but I think I have a much better idea. And so that was it, really, like, oh my God, he was a dark individual, but really, you had to do that. And the fact that Eric was not there and was not the person who found him, but that Eric was there, and they were so close. It was really devastating. I was in Boston, and actually, back to how I give everybody a hard time. So when Ming Tsai, who was discovered on my show, had his East Meets West show on the Food Network, I used to rib him all the time. Ming, you never have any women on your show as guests. You got to do something about that. And he didn't, I don't know how much, he didn't do it that much back then. But then when he had his own show, he started inviting more women on. So I was on his show several times. So I was in Boston about to do his show. And so we did the show, and then we ended up toasting Anthony and just saying what a sad, sad thing that was. So, there's all sorts of reasons that people take their own lives. But I will say, having dipped in that world a bit, celebrity corrupts, and it's really hard. So if that was the last straw, along with other things, I don't know. It got to him.
And just like all the traveling too. Like
Yeah.
It just like throws you.
It can be a
off.
lonely life, and obviously we don't really speculate and know anything. Bridging the gap relationship. I think social media is another interesting iteration of experiencing a life where people think they know you, and it can feel lonely and parasocial and things like that. And I think that impacted celebrity chefs for a while, and people and TV personalities, and I'm sure you understand that.
It's funny you say that. I knew Rachel Ray back when she was on the Food Network, and matter of fact, sort of mentored her a little bit, although I also was sort of jealous of her because then she sort of took over. But then she asked me on her show in 2010, Rachel Ray, she had a regular. I went on the show. I was like, okay, I can do this. So I went on the show, and I really liked her, and I thought, I want to be friends. And then I realized, and she's always so friendly and so nice. I've now been on a million times. But then I thought, I don't know if she has time for friends. I'm sure she does.
But that's such an interesting point and probably true. And by the way, my single experience on the Rachel Ray show was when I caught a towel on fire, and there was an audience, and Sarah, my business partner, and Rachel continued cooking, and I took the towel behind me and put it in the sink and turned on the water. And I got a lot of comments like, wow, that was, because some people didn't even notice that it happened.
You. I mean, really.
But sorry, I just had to throw in my Rachel Ray anecdote. But yeah,
that's wonderful.
When you get, it's like everyone aspires to this level of success and fame and things. And then once you're there, not that I know this personally, but just seeing other people go through it, it's lonely at the top, as they say.
No, absolutely is.
Well, I think I even heard an interview with you where you were explaining your daily schedule. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that was a 7 a.m. show, then take the kids to school to get back, do the 3 p.m. show, start dinner, finish dinner, go to the next show. And I was like, oh my God.
Like, where is there time for a life in that?
I still have an excellent husband.
Yeah.
When the Food Network suggested that I do this live call-in show, which meant I wouldn't be home any night until 8:15 during the work week, I went to him. I said, I can't. The kids were 9 and 5. I said, I can't do this. He said, no, you must.
We love him.
We do.
Wow.
We do. Yeah. So that really helps. Yeah, that was a crazy time. I couldn't do it now. Now I can't cook and talk at the same time. Forget about it. Yeah.
That's an art. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
joining us.
Guys.
This is a thrilling conversation.
You're going to get me watching TikTok, okay?
Yeah,
We're going to have to sit here. You're going to have to show me how to sign up.
So everyone, please follow Sarah on TikTok.
We're gonna try to make sure we get your correct username, and I'm very excited to borrow this book. And Fabrizio, I'll share with you.
Please, please do.
Yeah.
And then we'll give it back to you, and then maybe, I don't know, who knows, maybe we can have dinner together. Cook.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Friends of Anthony Bourdain.
You can listen along wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, review. Let us know if there's someone you're dying for us to interview on the pod. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all the social media platforms at Friends of Anthony Bourdain.